show starts in 1 minute. Good evening, folks, and a hearty welcome to our drive-in theater. We have a wonderful evening's entertainment lined up for you, one that will provide several hours of pleasurable relaxation and diversion for you and your family.
Like 9 out of 10 film stars, Raquel Welch uses Lux Beauty Soap.
Well, no, I like to be a woman and a man to be a man, you know.
We hope you'll make this a weekly visit. You love the tasty array of snacks we have to offer. Bring your friends. There are always wonderful new pictures to see. We hope you have a wonderful time.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Longhouse, the NPR for the sensible centrist. How are you doing, Ludwig Path?
I'm doing very well, thank you. So it's winter and cold here still, even though we're almost in April.
Came back with a vengeance this week, I feel. We're almost made it to springtime, but that's usually how it is.
17th of May is the Norwegian national holiday, and I always heard like this meme where the boomers were talking about how it was snowing during the 17th of May because we were complaining. And I mean, it might be this year, you know. I might live to see it.
Right, maybe. With all the, well, are we 30 seconds in? I guess we're more than 30 seconds in, but if it snows on the 17th of May, it's going to be because of global warming, and if it doesn't, it's going to be because of global warming. So
at least we can agree on that.
At least we can agree on that.
Yeah. I see we have a lot of Indians in the chats. Yeah.
In the chat, yeah, we've attracted a lot of Indians, and Ludwig Path was wondering if it was because I put computing in the title. Maybe that's it.
So we suspected it was like the detector of all the Pajit Bombay certified Java coders that showed up here, but maybe it's another breed.
And I pointed out Vingle in the chat here, friend of the channel, of course, said India global superpower by 2023, and that we meme about that, but you have to think about who are the ruling class, who are leading the technocratic managerial class these days. It's mostly Indians.
Yes.
The Prime Minister of Britain, the Prime Ministers of many countries are the...
Ireland
might be Islamic, but yeah.
Well, it's close. I mean, if it's Pakistani, right? They're basically
fair
Indians,
enough.
So they'll behead me, but it's similar.
Well, they're going to behead you. But...
yeah, they will.
Not me.
Sorry, that's why I stay anonymous so far.
Exactly.
But yeah, they also run like the Fortune 500 big tech companies, right? All of the big tech CEOs are now Indians, so we're going to have to start talking about the IQ instead of the JQ and announce our love for the nation of Israel at the beginning of every broadcast.
You mean India?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yeah, India, definitely.
Force of habit, right?
Yep.
So I called the title of this episode discussing dissident computing, because it's a bunch of topics that in my head have a certain kind of relation. But I would like to sort of just have a talk about it to see if I can formalize those connections. And it all starts back in the 70s with what was then called the hacker movement or early hacker culture, which later, some would say, grew into what we know today as the free software movement. And now it's pretty obvious, you know, to anyone who knows a bit about computer history, that the people behind the original thoughts of hacker culture, and we'll get into that in a moment, and later on more free software culture, kind of lost the battle with the big businesses and the technocrats, and in a very extreme way, considering how what we would call the modern web, or is it called Web 3? Or is it called Web 2?
We're not at Web 3 yet. I think we're
Oh,
approaching
that's the
Web
way it
3, and
is.
it's in the discussions and
Right.
in the works now.
So
with
what you would call
certain
sort of the
implementations.
ghettoified walled garden, the post-Facebook internet, right?
Well,
There's very little room for, or there was very little room for free and open software back then. But there seems to be some kind of resurgence of people who are pushing this, and in terms of like specifically just looking at, you know, the number of Linux installs, that's a number that's been steadily going up since it was released in the early 2000s. And there is something to be said about, if you want to be a dissident, at a certain point, you're going to have to also remove yourself from the tools that the elites use because they control them.
yeah, most certainly. But I do like my pre-configured software. I think it's a pain in the ass to use Linux, to be honest. I mean,
do
when I
agree.
started to study computer science, I was all on board on the free software train, but it was just too much hassle in the end. I mean, at some point, you just want people to make decisions. I don't want to have to sit and configure everything.
And that's the thing. We'll sort of get into that dichotomy of, all right, do we want dissident software or do we want better prepackaged software? And
Well,
you know,
I mean,
a lot of
my
the things
ideas
end up in you know, the good old, well, I would just like different elites, right?
Yes. I mean, with Linux installations, I don't know. I mean, is this counting just private installations? Because I mean, if we're counting, you know, you could be counting corporate installations just as a result of an increased corporate presence and, you know, big data centers running Linux and so on.
That's fair. I would have to look closer at the numbers. I don't have them in front of me right now. I just looked at like quick, like, okay, what is the popularity of Linux now compared to when was it released? 2003, 2? I don't remember.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, people can look that up. I mean, Linux didn't die. It was just kind of the idealized vision of Linux that died in a sense.
91. But... Sorry, I'm thinking of something else. Yeah.
Yes, but I mean, from what we know of elite theory and what we've talked about with Burnham and managerialism and sort of the science of management, the free software people were never going to win. Like, yeah. I hate to say, like, you know, bring the conclusion down so early with this stuff, but I there's just no world that I can imagine where like the normal casual person wants to install Linux on their machine and sit and talk about, you know, new distros, new pieces of software, and like looking through stuff. I totally understand where it's coming from, but this is like the idealism and the concepts that exist in the free software movement are just not compatible, I think, with a mass
They're not,
adoption.
because the idea of, at the core, the idea of a free software movement is saying that software isn't for everyone. But a managerial, technocratic state requires software to be for everyone in the same way that democracy has to be for everyone. And you can't opt out of democracy, right?
No, you can't. And I mean, with the just having everybody approach it this way, I mean, the problem with people like, let's say, Richard Stallman, who is in the thumbnail, is that they have this kind of anarchist, you know, they're in kind of slightly in sort of the green quadrant of the political compass, I would say, or maybe sort of in between like the green and the purple quadrant in the bottom there, and they have very strong opinions about how software should be used and so on, but they're not really interested in actually enforcing that. So they would probably, if I'm guessing right, not be in favor of any central authority forcing people to use open software, right, or punishing companies who'd want to use closed software. Is this something you've thought about?
Yes, in a way. And you as you said, they're sort of libertarian in their thinking, and I pulled out it's from a book called Hacker Heroes. Let me pull this up real quick. I'll find the name of the book real fast. The book is named, of course, I don't have it right here. There it is. Hackers, Heroes of the Computer Revolution from 1984. and in that, Stephen Levy is his name. He compiles sort of the original hackers. And then when I say the original hackers, I mean the early hackers. I'm talking MIT labs, maybe 70s, early 80s. And this sort of hit the ground running in the mid 80s with, as I said, this book came out in 1984. I think GNU started in the late 70s, the GNU development. And in the mid to late 80s, a lot of these sort of calcified these hacker cultures or this hacker movement into its own sort of ethic movement. And this book outlines the following points as the ideals of the hacker movement. So the first one is access to computers and anything that might teach you something about the way the world works should be unlimited and total. Second is all information should be free. The third is hackers should be judged by their hacking, not bogus criteria such as degrees, race, age, or position. 4, you can create art and beauty on a computer. And 5, computers can change your life for the better. And I think looking back, I don't think they've been able to win on any of these points. But my point isn't my point isn't to really just hammer this, because I think that the point is that, well, you're going to have to learn something from them, and the future has to be performed on more open software where you do have a more personal relation to the programs that are running. Otherwise, you shouldn't have it. You shouldn't have access to it. But that, expects a different world than the one we live in. So whether or not you will be able to, in that sense, unplug for the matrix or not, I am not sure about. And that sort of leads me to the other point, but we can get back to that later when it comes to the managerialism of it all. I do have, did you read the article I sent you, the frack article? The one that
not sure I did. You're gonna have to refresh me a little bit.
It's from this old sort of hacker magazine, basically. So I can read this, and we'll get into some of this, and then I want to talk a bit about Ted Nelson, who I find to be a very interesting, I guess, cynic when it comes to computers, and he provides a very refreshing perspective on how you can think about this, and how you, as a dissident in the modern world, should think about how computer works. So I'll bring this up first. Let me see here. Present screen, share screen, Rack magazine. All right. So this is called The Techno Revolution by Dr. Crash, and it was published in 1986. And I think this is a very good sort of just introduction to what did the original hackers, quote unquote, believe. Hacking, it is a full-time hobby, taking countless hours per week to learn, experiment, and execute the art of penetrating multi-user computers. Why do hackers spend a good portion of their time hacking? Now, it is important to, before I go further, to remember that hacking, well, by this point, it might have gotten the definition of someone who breaches computer systems, but up until this time, hacking, no, because I've seen interviews from 1986 where they're still debating the meaning. So the meaning of hacker before this was pretty much, someone who likes to tinker with computers. That was pretty much it.
Yeah, it's like if you're a car tinkerer, then you're a car hacker or something. If you're, you open the hood of your car and you're actually changing parts and
you're
customizing and whatever.
Yeah. Okay, why do hackers spend a good portion of their time hacking? Some might say it is scientific curiosity, others that it's for mental stimulation. But the true roots of hacker motives run much deeper than that. In this file, I will describe the underlying motives of the aware hackers, make known the connections between hacking, phreaking, carding, and anarchy, and make known the Techno Revolution, which is laying seeds in the mind of every hacker. To fully explain the true motives behind hacking, we must first take a quick look into the past. In the 1960s, a group of MIT students built the first modern computer system. This wild, rebellious group of young men were the first to bear the name hackers. The systems that they developed were intended to be used to solve world problems and to benefit all of mankind. As we can see, this has not been the case. The computer system has been solely in the hands of big business and the government. The wonderful device meant to enrich life has become a weapon which dehumanizes people. To the government and large businesses, people are no more than disk space, and the government doesn't use computers to arrange aid for the poor, but to control nuclear death weapons. The average American can only have access to a small microcomputer, which is worth only a fraction of what they pay for it. The businesses keep the true state-of-the-art equipment away from people and behind a steel wall of incredibly high prices and bureaucracy. It is because of this state of affairs that hacking was born.
Yeah,
Hackers,
big sad. I'm playing
big
a very
sad.
small violin in the background here. It's so small you can't hear it, but corporations, man. In the future,
Corporations, man.
corporations, corporate Democrats, corporate everything. It fucks it up.
Hackers realize that the businesses aren't the only ones who are entitled to modern technology. They tap into online systems and use them to their own advantage. Of course, the government doesn't want the monopoly of technology broken, so they have outlawed hacking and arrested anyone who's caught. Even worse than the government is the security departments of businesses and companies. They act as their own private armies, and their ruthless tactics are overlooked by the government, as it also serves their needs. Hacking is a major facet of the fight against the computer monopoly. One of the ways hackers accomplish their means has developed into an art in itself: phone phreaking. It is essential that every hacker also be a freak, because it is necessary to utilize the technology of the phone company to access computers far from where they live. The phone company is another example of technology abused and kept from people with high prices. Phreaking, for those unaware, is the idea of hacking basically phone lines, phone services. Back in the day, you could manufacture a small whistle that mimicked the sound that the phone repairman would play in order to gain access to basically free calls, unlimited access to where you could call, etc., etc. You get admin mode basically on the phone.
So, but I think these people see themselves as like Robin Hood characters, basically. That they think that the services should just be free for everybody to use at all times, and them breaking into it is just we're taking it back essentially.
Yeah, we're opening it up.
Yep.
Hackers often find that their existing equipment, due to the monopoly tactics of computer companies, is inefficient for their purposes. Due to the inexorbitantly high prices, it is impossible to legally purchase the necessary equipment. This need has given still another segment of the fight: credit carding. Carding is a way of obtaining the necessary goods without paying for them. It is again due to the company's stupidity that carding is so easy, and shows that the world's businesses are in the hands of those with considerably less technical know-how than we, the hackers. And
don't say it so loudly, okay? They've gotten a lot more sophisticated. Don't rub it in their faces. If you know this stuff, you got to keep it to yourself. I think that is one of the big problems there. If they're trying to like mass proliferate these techniques to circumvent advertisements and corporate security, and if everybody knows it, they're going to prioritize it, and it's going to be shut down very quickly.
As it was with database access and the invention of like SQL databases, pretty much because companies were afraid that, or there were examples of programmers hiding away minuscule amounts of data and transaction sort of overflows. I think, have you watched Office Space, the movie?
Oh yeah, it's a great film.
Yeah. So in that movie, the guy, he gets in on like a scheme where like every time his company makes a transaction and there's like some leftover amount, like a point something of a cent, the computer system rounds down that number, right? But what if you, instead of rounding down that number, told the computer to put that minuscule amount in a different account, right? And so that's pretty much based on semi-reality in that this was possible and this was something that companies were afraid that their developers were doing, even before that movie. Let me see. It is again due to the company's stupidity that carding is so easy, and it shows that the world's businesses are in the hands of those with considerably less technical know-how than we, the hackers. Still true to this day, by the way. There is one last method of this war against computer abusers. This is a less subtle, less electronic method, but much more direct and gets the message across. I am speaking of what is called anarchy. Anarchy, as we know it, does not refer to the true meaning of the word, no ruling body, but to the process of physically destroying buildings and governmental establishments. This is a very drastic yet vital part of this techno revolution. Hacking must continue. We must train newcomers in the art of hacking. We must also increase computer crashing. I know that crashing a computer seems waste, but when there is no other way to subvert a business, their system must be shut down. As I stated above, this is only on the motives. If you need a tutorial on how to perform any of the above stated methods, blah, blah, blah. Whatever you do, continue the fight, whether you know it or not. If you're a hacker, you are a revolutionary. Don't worry, you're on the right side.
Total computer death.
Total
Smash
computer
computers.
death.
Launch
Yes.
computers into the moon. Yeah. Shit
Et
in
cetera, et
manager's
cetera.
food. Yep. Well, you can see where people got a lot of the inspiration for some of the entertainment that came out, not just Office Space. I'm hearing a little bit of Fight Club in there, mentioned
It's
in the
Fight
comments, like
Club,
the
it's
movie Hackers.
war games, it's all of this stuff, right? It's Hack the
Yeah,
Planet. It's yeah.
Yeah, that and Neuromancer as well. It's very much just
Neuromancer,
taken
yeah.
from jargon that existed in this era. You know,
Yeah,
people
just straight
listening
up
over this
lifting
stuff
it.
and just
Yeah.
adopting it into entertainment. And I can totally see why it's very attractive when you're reading it out this way. It's easy to sell
It is.
people on it, particularly if you don't know any better. Like if you're a young person with some technological smarts and the right temperament, this is an easy sell. You don't have to recruit
Yes.
people.
Now, we can read this today and we can think, well, that's it's kind of silly, right? That they thought that they could win this way. But I would like to use this character called Ted Nelson as a vehicle to sort of explain how this came to be and remind the listeners on how they should be thinking about technology. I don't know what I sent to you from him, but I think one of his better
I think the
videos.
hyperlink document stuff, but I'm not sure how relevant it is. He had like this
No, that's
software
just
to
sort of
do
his
this
harebrained
interlinked
stuff. Yeah.
It was pretty
Ted
cool
Nelson
though.
is a weird character who has since sort of the early days of this been working on an alternative to the internet pretty much, because he sees the way that the internet was introduced, meaning that he sees that, how do I put this? He sees that the way Xerox pretty much invented the modern computing in the sense that they invented the 2D windows. They spurred on Microsoft Word and Acrobat that, in his eyes, basically just mimic paper, right? So you have this computer. For the first time, you have a computer that can display something on your screen, and it doesn't have to be confined to either your head or the world in which you live in a sense. And so he's talking about escaping the prison of paper, because that's what pretty much what Microsoft Word did. They sort of they put a glass box, and inside that glass box you can write stuff, but only in between here. You can't take notes in the margins in Microsoft Word, for example. It's like you can on a piece of paper. So it's a very strange way of thinking about it, but it's a much more human way of interacting with a database, is what he envisions. Now, that's a project that he's been probably working on his entire life, and he's probably never going to finish it because
No,
I don't
when
think
you're
he even
reading it,
understands it himself.
yeah.
Right?
When you're reading it out, it makes me think about have you watched Peep Show?
Yes.
Yeah, the manager character, Alan Johnson, he has this line where he comes into the office of one of the main characters and he says, "Oh, nice screen. I got a 45-inch plasma in mine." when you
Right.
put a document up on that baby, you are really looking at that document. It's like this. Yeah,
Right.
I'm going to look at documents on the computer.
But what he does provide someone like us is a very interesting way of, or a very, very good reminder of looking at technology. And one of the things or the lectures he have uh, tells you that technology is not the thing we talk about when we say technology colloquially. When we talk about, say, the iPhone, or we talk about YouTube, the platform, or Twitter, the platform we're streaming on right now. Twitter is not a technology. YouTube is not a technology. To some extent, maybe not even the web browser you're listening to this to in is technology. It is the wrapping around the technology, the packaging of the technology, the protocols, the TCP/IP, the HTTP protocols, the etc., that are sending the packets from my silicon to your silicon, and silicon. Sorry, not silicone. That's something else. That is the technology. And what we choose to do with it has been preordained by managers going all the way back to the 70s, right? The reason you have a mouse is because Xerox sold Steve Jobs on selling us the mouse. Now you can say, okay, well, but it works really well for interacting with a computer. Well, sure, maybe it does. But what if you could do something else? What if the mouse was never invented? How would the world have looked like today? And the important thing to realize is that everything about modern technology, when it comes to the computer world, right? When it comes to modern computing, is managerial selection of technology, or managerial wrapping of that technology. And that is the way I think that you have to sort of try to, in a philosophical sense, free yourself um, from the paradigm that is being presented to you. And I'm veering off here, but I don't want to spend too much time on this. So if you can understand that the reason that Microsoft Word looks like it does is because Bill Gates decided something. Not because of the constraints of technology, not because we couldn't do it or there wasn't enough hours, or maybe that was his reasoning, but it's because Bill Gates decided something 50 years ago or 40 years ago. The reason that you cannot um, take notes on a web page is because, Tim Berners-Lee didn't think it was important when he invented the first HTML documents, and so today you can't do that, right? And all of these things are decisions made by people, political decisions made by people in a political sense, that shape the world in which you live in today. Because when the decisions are managerial and they serve the companies whom the manager work for, they will increasingly dehumanize you, and they will increasingly become nebulous and abstract and less and less and less. As computing units, as computers, they will less and less and less reflect the real world, and more and more abstract you from the real world. And now, without thinking, we're already talking about like service economy stuff. Do you have any thoughts like that before I veer off into another
Well, yeah, this
tangent?
I mean, it is like the standard type of computer free software idealist talk, and I'm completely
Yes.
on board with the fact that you have to understand that there's a certain history and reasons why things are the way they are.
Yeah.
You can never take things for given, especially if you are like a political dissident. You have to, turn over every rock and see, okay, is there a reason why does it have to be this way? And figure out
Exactly.
what exact things do you want to change, and not just have it be like this nebulous thing that you're complaining about, like the system, quote unquote, or well, we're saying the elites, but like just vaguely like the elites. You have to actually look at history and see what's been done. Of course, the problem then, I guess, with someone like you're quoting is that from their perspective, it's very much like this kind of, well, we think that information should be available to everybody, and everybody should be free to hack
that's
their own
where
computers.
they tread wrong, right? They tread wrong in saying that the solution to this is, well, we just make it available to everyone. No, because the people don't want access to this information. They've proven so time and time again. That's not how it works, right?
Yeah, exactly. But of course, there's, we could sit and say, well, there's, it is like this idea of the corporation, the corporation bad narrative, like the left liberal thing, where it's like, it's always corporation bad, and if the corporation does something, then it's bad without even thinking too much about it. And I think we need to kind of reorient ourselves a little bit and look at the different things that, okay, maybe sometimes the corporation did something good, sometimes it did something bad, and we know exactly why it was bad or why it wasn't bad, and what kind of advantages and disadvantages that we get from these technological changes, and maybe have that higher up on the agenda than some of these kind of culture war points that take up so much space.
Here you can see sort of the attack vector against the modern managerial corporation, right? It's because of the change in thinking from the production to the manufacturing to what's called the service economy. For people into economics, it would be the primary, secondary, and tertiary economies. And the primary economy is actual resource extraction. So like mining or farming, right? The second economic unit is the secondary economy, which is the production of products based on those resources. So let's say the primary one is coffee beans, right? The secondary one is, say, you grind coffee, so you can buy like Nescafe Gold or Folgers or something, right? The tertiary one would be the service economy, which is you can go to a shop and be served coffee. Like a barista will make you a coffee. That is the service. And the world has almost moved beyond that, but I'll get to that later. The world has increasingly, the Western world, I say, has increasingly moved towards the service economy. I looked at some graphs just today, and for nations like Norway or the US, we're talking about like 5% of your entire economy is primary economy, meaning farming, mineral or resource extraction, etc. Maybe like 10% at the highest number is producing stuff, and then it's like 80% of your economy is service economy, which is an economy that by its very nature is abstracted one layer from reality, right? Or maybe two, even. And so this, I'm sorry, did you have a comment?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's you're probably going to go onto this later, but even with like the new sort of mature Web 2.0 system that we have now, it's not even service economy in terms of going
we're
to
getting to that,
being served, but
we're going to,
we're getting to the human cloud, as Klaus Schwab has dubbed it, right? Where you're just going to.
I
like
would almost say
or,
that's a fifth one, right? Because
Oh,
I would say the
there's another
fourth one. Yeah, the fourth one is because you get a service economy, but within the service economy, it's been sort of a hard. The academics and etc. have been having a hard time defining what a service economy is, and what a service is, and how a company should look.
I sort of feel like the third category is just like everything that's not 1 and 2, unless we have other categories.
But at this point, if you think about how modern businesses think, they will all have changed themselves from probably a number 2 to a service business. All right, so let's say let's do an example. You are okay, so you own a fleet of trucks. You are a trucking company, right? 20, 30 years ago, you would make a deal with a company like Michelin or Michelin, depending on where you are in the world, to provide you with tires for your fleet of trucks, right? I mean, I have 15 trucks and guys, driving around, and they need tires. And so uh, every X amount of years, I negotiate a contract with Michelin to deliver X amount of tires. Maybe there's even like a service clause where, they'll once a year or twice a year, they'll send out some guys, or I'll, send my trucks in and they'll check the tires. Now, these days, Michelin isn't really in the business of selling tires anymore because they have rebranded or restructured themselves as a service business. So what Michelin sells you now is access to the service of having a tire. Or what you really want is, they define it as, you don't really need tires. Um, you need to be able to drive on the road with your trucks, right? And we help you do that by providing you with tires. And we'll put a bunch of like Internet of Things stuff in your tires so that we know exactly how far you've driven and when we need to replace your tires, right? Because um, because we get paid by the kilometer or the mile of how long you've driven. So even this tire company, Michelin, isn't even in the business of providing tires anymore. They're selling a subscription model. They're selling tires as a service, right? Um,
Yeah, I mean, this
and
is it's a development that you see in a lot of other sectors as well. I went to a seminar once about this, where they say, like, in the Netherlands, like particularly, the Amsterdam is one of the places that are furthest ahead with this stuff, where they're selling, real estate kind of as a service. By that I mean, like, you'll buy lighting, for example, at an airport. It's sort of a service. It's a subscription service. You don't own, the airport doesn't actually own the lights. Like the walls in your
exactly,
house is sort of as a service, like a subscription service, where they'll, as bizarre as it sounds, they'll reuse the material constantly, and they're tracking what materials you have in your house. And if you can't pay the subscription, they'll come and take it away. So I mean, it sounds completely bizarre, like these sort of memes where, my credit card defaulted or whatever,
exactly.
so I have to like I had an abortion, but the credit card, defaulted, so they put the baby back in again. But I mean, it's
And
kind
then
of
you
what it's
also,
like, isn't it?
it is because what is traditionally looked at as a service in the service economy is something that is homogeneous, right? Meaning, sorry, heterogeneous, meaning that um, it is actually not easily swappable, or it's not easily reproducible for the customer. So let's say a hairdresser, right, or a restaurant. Those are service businesses, but if you go to two different restaurants, you're going to have two different experiences. Even if you go to the same restaurant twice, you're probably not going to have the exact same service, right? Or the restaurant can't guarantee the same service every time. That's just not possible. So this kind of service thinking, uh, this layer above that, um, it sort of has the implicit thought that actually these services are homogeneous, that one product or service in this sense is swappable with another. Because you're saying, are you actually paying for a restaurant visit, or are you paying for the service of being provided food and wine? Are you paying for your car, or are you paying for reliable transport to your destination when needed? Are you
Well, I mean, with this, I think there's a sort of, it's very easy to get confused with using language of sort of services and using the language of subscriptions, because I feel like it's slightly different. Because what they're sort of doing, moving things over to being subscription services, it's really things that have been conventionally
No,
thought of
I'm
as
I'm not talking about
products, right?
subscriptions. I'm just talking about abstracting away your physical sort of, I want a car, right? And instead saying, do you actually want a car, or do you want to get where you need to be when you want to, right?
Yeah,
And that's the problem they're solving.
I think
That's
I can see
basically
that,
Uber, right?
but it is sort of moving the product car, or sort of the ownership of the car, to the leasing of the car. And
Exactly.
I mean, it's very much answering, like you talk about the managerial influence. This is very much in line with the type of more global, global
Exactly.
elite type of environmental goals, for instance, plays into this.
Yep.
In particular, like I mentioned with the real estate
Yep.
stuff, where they're okay, we have to be able to reuse this, so we can't just allow people to own something and then, well, like, you could potentially trash that car, and we can't recycle it properly. So we're going to have to. It's basically like these big corporations have the
You can swap
responsibility to
things out
manage.
freely because
Yeah,
on the spreadsheet, a car is a car is a car, a restaurant is a restaurant is a restaurant, and you're really just paying for the experience anyway, and not
but
the
the
actual thing
question
that you're
is,
doing. So the
the question
spreadsheet doesn't really care what kind of experience that is,
the
right?
thing I think that the restaurant example might be slightly confusing. I don't know if there's any restaurants that are starting to sell subscription services, like, because you don't really own anything in the restaurant in that sense. Like, I mean, you might come there to buy some condiments or a dinner or something, but it's like you're not doing that on a subscription basis. And you never sort of own the restaurant in the sense, you just were able to pay to sit there.
No, I'm talking about, let's go back to our example of, I'm not talking about providing um I'm not talking about providing a subscription model. I'm talking about thinking about things in the sense that everything is a service, right? You have to get into the mindset that literally everything is a service, right? The restaurant is not a place, it's not food. It is a place you go to have an experience. Your car is not a car, it is a service that gets you from A to B, right? That's the because
Okay, yeah,
that's the baseline for thinking in this way. And when you start thinking in this way, a lot of the things start to make sense in terms of like what, like, you'll own nothing and be happy, etc., right?
yeah, exactly. I
Um,
mean, yeah, that is
you're
exactly
not
the
paying for
rationale
food,
behind them.
you're paying for not dying, right? You're paying for the service of being
Have a
alive. Do you see
subscription
what I'm
to
saying?
carbohydrates, and then
Right.
that's. But I mean, I keep going back to Adam Curtis's documentary, but he did talk about this in the Century of the Self. That, I mean, it's something that I've like to dub to, like, the different versions of capitalism. I mean, in, say, the United States, you started off with there's like the secondary economy of, like, the Fordism, right? The factories, where they were taking in the material, and they had the entire supply line in the United States from all of the material, and then just building, these Ford cars completely. I mean, it was all the same type of car. You bought the car and you own the car, and it was a product that you used, and that was that. Then they sort of moved more into this, the 80s kind of digital, globalized capitalism that was more of what they call, like, the shareholder capitalism, where it's really all about the
Yep.
ownership, and, like, the total product, and the supply line is not that important. You're sort of able to remix these, remix a lot more of the supply lines, to try to make as much profit as you can. That was sort of the appeal from a lot of this Thatcherism stuff. But in order to get there, it's not just a supply side thing where, okay, people think about how it's built differently, but you also need a different consumer base. People have to think differently about how they're consuming the product. So it went
Well, and
from,
this
you
is
you
this
get
is
like a
where
standard.
disrupting comes into
Yeah.
play, right? Because the hip new model that everyone is using um, is the continuous change model, right? It's why you see so many companies, like, people are complaining that all these, like, big companies are, like, changing their names and their logos all the time, right? It's because their business model now is what's called service reconfiguration, right? They're always changing. They have to be always changing because the money is being made in sort of repositioning yourself as a middleman in somewhere where you can make money.
Yeah, it
So
seems to make
nothing
sense.
needs to be manufactured. No real value needs to be added. It's about sort of being the first person to rethink something, right?
Well, I mean, it does make sense, but just to complete my point here, is that there has been an effort, both from the corporations and from the public sector, to kind of change consumer behavior, into something that is more tailored to the individual specific tastes, and thinking of products as something as an identity, basically. And it's very
Yeah.
easy to go from that to having a service as an identity, and then having a subscription
Yep.
as a form of identity. But this was not the way that people thought about products in the past. It was just sort of a hat is a
No.
hat and a car is a car, and you buy that, and everybody has the same coat, everybody has the same hat, everybody has the same car, and it's just
Exactly.
the bare essentials that you need, and that's not important. It's nice
Yes.
to have. We're happy that everybody has that. Everybody gets the same thing. And I mean, based on those models, that's where you get the predictions, like from John Maynard Keynes, where they talked about people are only going to have to work, 5-hour work weeks, 10-hour work weeks. Everybody's going to be provided for. We're not going to need to produce anymore, because from that perspective, where people are only living at kind of a minimum, and you're just getting standard products, and you don't think any more about it. Well, I mean, then you're good. You don't need to have these 80-hour, 40, 60, 80-hour work weeks. You can just do the minimal that you need to keep the factories running. Everybody gets a standard black Ford, and you drive around in it. But the reason that it's
Or
gone
your
in the opposite
Trabant,
direction,
or
where
your
people are
Lada.
working more instead of working less, is because of this continual customization of services
Yes.
and products into people's personal taste. But you also have to
which
create
is
the
spurred
demand for that.
on by like line go upism, not to sort of blame just one thing, but that's part of it, right?
Yes, line go up. It's really the fear that it's going to end, basically, for the corporations and for the government. The corporations are not going to be able to produce, and the government won't have anything to
we
tax.
got into
So,
this problem to bring it sort of a bit back around to this idea of managerial influence on computing. We got to this problem by abstracting our service economy totally from reality, right? Which then creates a new reality that has to be represented in our computing power. Because all of these businesses, at least today, right? That the meme is to say that, every business is a technology business. Every business is an IT business. That's the meme, right? You're not.
it's true.
Yeah, Michelin is no longer a tire company. It's an IT business, because IT is what is enabling their new subscription model to work. So
Yes, I mean,
you've
like
abstracted your operations away from reality, and the computing that you employ represents this new reality wherein you don't even produce tires anymore. And so that creates a feedback loop in which, the way the computer works, right? The meme from Little Britain, computer says no, right? The way the computer works shapes the reality of the humans using it, right?
I see
Do you
this
agree?
every day. I see
Right.
it every day, and I think of it the exact same way. Like, every business is basically the database, and
Yeah,
the database and the rules that are put around that, and that's what governs the entire business. If you can change that, then you just change how the businesses work. You don't
and
have
we're on
to.
YouTube. YouTube
Yeah,
themselves say we don't control the algorithm. We can try to nudge it by like tweaking parameters. But, if we get something wrong, then suddenly everyone gets like baby videos on their recommendations, right?
yes.
So they don't even really control it anymore. So this has
Yes,
created a new reality, which is, twice removed from the actual reality in which we do exist, not on the computer,
and it's funny,
that
like you said,
now you base sort of further developments on.
and
Yeah?
it's funny, like you said, because it's not just the way I'm presenting it. It's that it's a supply side thing, where on the back end, people are using these databases and these automated processes to dictate what they're going to do and how the employees
Yes.
are going to behave. But now it's
Yes.
also, with some businesses, like the front end of the business, where the consumer experience is completely dictated by
Yes, the
a machine
product that
learning,
is
right?
being sort of presented to the consumer wasn't even real to begin with, in the philosophical sense. I'm not saying that it doesn't provide any value, right? Probably does, because it saves you some time or whatever, right? And I'm reminded of like a meme I saw a couple of weeks ago on Twitter, which takes like the idea that the way that you perceive the world kind of influences your understanding of it. And it was through like all of these ways of thinking about God and the Bible, etc. And it was like, dude, the world, like, say in the 1900s, like early industrial revolution, it's like, dude, the world is, an intricate collection of gears, and God is the watchmaker, right? And the modern version is, dude, the world is a computer, and God is a programmer, right? We all live in the matrix. That's that's the big hot take, right?
Whoa.
But
It's
obviously you would think
true.
that because your world is computers, right? You see what I'm
Yes.
saying? Your perception of reality is through the world of computers.
Everything you're interacting with, like all of the social interactions that you have, is mediated by a computer or some computer program with rules. And
At some
it
point, right?
sounds nefarious, but it's just the truth. That
So
there are this
so
managerial decisions and computer
exactly,
code that is just determining the format of all of the social interactions that you have on some level, and the interactions you have with businesses and the public sector as well.
And so I made this tweet that sort of summed this up in my head, right? Where I said, if culture is downstream from law, I think law is downstream from perception, right? The perception is downstream from computing, and the computing is downstream from management. And I think in that is the opening where, when we say that we're sensible centrists, what we really want is to change the makeup of our elites. It's to change the makeup of our managers who are making decisions based on these computers, right? We need people who understand that these computers actually don't represent reality. Can we do that? I don't know. I mean, it might be too late, right?
Well, I mean, with the culture is downstream from law point, in my perception, I see a lot of similarities between law and computer code. To me, it's sort of like two sides of the same thing, where you're writing down rules. On the computer, you're writing down rules and you're telling the machine that this is how something's going to be handled. And in that sense, I mean, culture is downstream from law. If you think of law as a form of computer code, it's really sort of the framework of how you're supposed to interact. And I mean, even before the computer, you could see that you could make the same argument that the law is a sort of artificial construct, but it's real in the sense that everybody has to abide by it, and that again shapes
and
the
it
social
does,
interactions
right?
and the culture.
But as it is now, we're 4 levels deep abstracted, right? So Nordanon says, what is management downstream from? That's kind of my point. I mean, it all becomes a circle, like a what's it called? A reinforcement thing. But my point is that it didn't used to be that way, because the cycle of managerialism in computing hadn't taken root before, 50 years ago, or 30 years ago, maybe. So what is management downstream from? I don't know. Maybe you can help me figure that out. But I don't think that's relevant, because we have to stop the computing at the level of the management. Really. You see what I'm
Nordanon is
saying?
like the kid in class, the sort of nosy kid. He keeps asking, what's above this, and who created God? Tell me.
Turtles all the way down. A
Who
feedback loop.
created
That's
God?
what I'm
I
looking
don't
for.
know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sit down, Einstein. We don't know. No, but it's a good question. We're not going to be able to, probably not going to be able to answer it. But I mean, my sort of big takeaway from this is really just to be conscious of, okay, what decisions have been made that are fortified in code that now will affect how we interact. The same way that you're aware of how laws work, you have to kind of understand how code works, maybe not in the nitty gritty, but to understand how exactly is it configured. On that note, I saw a sort of interesting tweet that was, I don't know if I put it on my timeline or I retweeted it. Let's just see if I think it was by Spandrel here. And the original tweet was by, I'd say, Amon Lyuk. I'll read it now. He says, Google search worked really well when there was a whole web full of content that wasn't specifically constructed to manipulate Google search.
Yes.
And then he says LLMs are working really well. There's a huge body of content for them to train that wasn't specifically constructed to manipulate LLMs. So, but
exactly.
This has become like, it was a bit of an aha moment for me, because like the reason that the web sucks now is because the people got smart about became aware of the algorithm
Well,
and the rules, and they started to make.
The paradigm change of Google changed reality through computing, right?
Yes,
A key part of your business in the span of 5 years became having a person who works at SEO optimization, right? I mean, that's changing reality.
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, there is a sort of reciprocal thing here where when you're dealing with intelligence, there will always be a sort of way to adapt both ways. And it's not just going to go one way. People will adapt, and this is something we talked about in the show before. People are using these computer models to try to predict things, and they get it wrong because they don't perceive the fact that there is a reciprocal relationship between the observer and the observed.
And so, I think that's enough, philosophizing to talk a bit about. I got onto this listening to a distributor's stream a couple of weeks ago where he said that I would love to go back to like a web 1.0, and that's what we should do as dissidents is trying to get out of the ghettoification of the modern web and return to a web 1.0. And then he uses Substack as an example of that, which is explicitly a web 2.0 tool, which confused me a bit. But I think what he means is early 2000s web 2.0, where
Yes.
forums reign supreme and blogs reign supreme, before sort of corralling people into pre-calculated feeds became the way of interacting with the internet.
I mean, I liked his video essay as usual, and even if I disagree with him, I just generally appreciate the way that he waxes poetically about these things. I mean, for the listeners, because we had a conversation about this previously, Web 1.0, from what I understand, it's really like the sort of 90s web that is read
only. From a technical perspective, right? That's what it is. And so I just think it's what Web 1.0 is.
Yeah, I mean,
no, that's what it is. The definition of Web 1.0 is a web that is read only.
But
the definition of Web 2.0,
yeah. But the question is, like, what does it mean?
You can post. That's it. You can send as a user somewhere. I can
read only web. It's just static websites, right? It's just pages, HTML that people have put up, and you can, here's my super cool page about my puppy, or about Godsmack, or the sort of latest new metal band that I like, and then you're just using these pages to, one page has a link to another page, and you can't do anything. There's no commenting. There's no saving information. You're just reading, and you're jumping from one page to another page. And if you want to,
which is why I think that when he says Web 1.0 and he says, Substack is a good example of that, he's thinking about early Web 2.0.
Yes. And by early Web 2.0, we mean Web 2.0 pre-2008, because I think we agreed that it's really, there were a lot of things that happened in 2008 that kind of changed how the web worked. You have the
Nordan on showing his Sumer creds here by saying one image websites. I mean, technically, you're right, Nordan on, but it's not image. But yes, they're static.
Well, he's right in I think the spirit of what he's saying is absolutely correct.
One document would be more correct.
But what kind of changed in 2008? You talk about the smartphones and the iPhones, and kind of like the mass adoption of internet and internet content by people. That was one vector where it's like you had all these people in the past. You'd had to be slightly above, maybe not like Stallman hacker level, but a little bit more interested, I think, in the internet to have like a full setup, home computer before 2008, where they came up with those sort of smartphone internet in your pocket technology.
Yes.
So it's like bringing the normies on board, standardizing the formats. The other thing was a lot of new web standards that came in, like HTML5, where streaming content became easier. More interactive pages became easier, to the point where instead of using these web pages where you're just clicking your way from one page to another page, people just start using these APIs, meaning that you can get everything on one page. And that's where you have, like, in China, you have the super apps where you just do everything from one app. But with these big pages like Twitter and Facebook, the Google and so on, they try to have it the same way, where you're just supposed to, like, you never leave Google. Basically, you're always on there, and they can bring you all the information from the other sites
to go to Google, to go to YouTube. Yeah.
onto the same site that you are. So they'll give you pop-ups, and there's a lot of interactions with the elements that you're using, and that you just get the information from these other databases through the APIs, and you never have to leave. And that's why, like, everything is now happening on 4 different web pages, which is really the difference between
the idea of the web app,
2008 2.0.
Yep. And so then the question is, all right, if that is an ideal, to try to return to something like that, or try to invoke that kind of mindset, how are we going to get there? Because there seems to be a wish for that. Because I see some people mentioned him in the comments before. People like Luke Smith, right, on YouTube, who's sort of like spearheading a lot of these thoughts from a more free and open software way of thinking, a libertarian free and open software way of thinking, where, I think he is almost the embodiment of Exit. I think he used to be he used to be a research assistant or something. Maybe he was even a professor. Like, don't quote me on this. But he used to work in a university, realized that everything has gone to shit and it's woke and horrible. And then I think he's just moved out, in the countryside somewhere in America, which means, in the middle of nowhere, where he can work on, Linux stuff and read the Bible pretty much, and vlog. So there is certainly, considering how many subscribers he has, a hunger for escaping this, right?
Yes.
But then the question is how. Society.
The best thing we can do is to promote, what I would call, like, technological health, and not just in terms of limiting screen time or using these kind of anti-blue light apps or productivity extensions and so on, but like,
no, in a philosophical
sort of
sense,
like
right?
tech consciousness in terms of, like, what does the technology do, and how do you want to tailor your technology experience to be the best for what you're trying to do in life. But the idea that, like, the mainstream is going to return to, like, the early Web 2.0, if you believe that, you just don't understand how things work.
Our spheres, specifically, right?
Well, yeah, it would be better to have our own infrastructures that are following more in line with these kind of early Web 2.0 principles, like the forums or something like that. Because right now we're using the same apps as everybody else.
Yeah, I don't expect mainstream culture to revert unless it collapses, right?
Well, reverting for mainstream culture is to stop using computers. Like, Granny was never sitting on IRC, and Granny was not sitting on forums, right?
The only way out of this, and going back to sort of the free and open software way of thinking, the only way out of this, and back to the the Luddite way of thinking, computers are for craftsmen who actually care about computers, is to take the computers away from the average guy.
Exactly. And they're not willing to do that because that's against their principles. So to me, like, the idealism is just, it is just that. It is idealism. It doesn't work with reality, the way I understand reality to work. What they can accomplish, like, it can never be accomplished.
My other proposition is, we have to become the managers who decide what the computer do. That's the other vector.
I'd like that better.
Also,
actually.
very far-fetched, right?
Yes.
So, and then we're just back at, what we just want to replace the elites, right? We just want to replace them. Which, ultimately, I guess that's what we want to do. But I think until then, for your own safety, building alternative infrastructure is the way to go. And if you have any experience in building software at all, I know that the Beowulf guys, the Shieldings Foundation, etc. They're always looking for people. So
Yeah, I see
check that out.
Jay Green River in the comments.
Yeah, Jay Green River's in the chat. You can probably message him either on Twitter, or you can find the Element stuff, or even if you follow the Element link in the description down below, you can hit us up and we'll send you on, because things are happening and it's going to take a while, but it is moving in the right direction. All right, let's see if we can find some stuff from the chat here. We've been going for an hour, and I'm not sure if we were gonna. I think we've covered every thought I wanted to cover.
Yeah, I agree. It's been a little bit Lex Friedmanish, but it's nice to have one of these episodes as well.
I mean, so I told. I'm not sure if I said it at the beginning or if I told you but this is like I have like 4 different thoughts in my head that I can't make into a single Substack. So we're just gonna sit and talk for an hour. Yeah, and Green River confirming. Thanks for the shout out. We really could use more people. That's good. Build our own sphere of websites that doesn't prey on people like Web 2.0. The problem isn't interactions, but how they prey on people. I agree. The problem isn't interaction, because allowing for interaction, again, the interaction is the technology. The wrapping is, what preys on you. Luke Smith was a linguist in academia. All right, so he was a linguist, and then he left to live in the country and joined an orthodoxy. Okay, and he's made like videos on like using like Vim to categorize your Bible verses and stuff like that. You get some really strange stuff out of it sometimes.
Terry Davis territory.
Yes, but not as unhinged. To be sure, I don't think Luke Smith is Terry Davis levels of schizo. I can't wait for LLMs to turn the web into an even worse pile of SEO'd garbage. We'll need to use AI to dig through the torrent of garbage. Signal versus noise arms race, basically. Well, we'll see. Maybe Google invents their own LLM to filter out the LLMs.
Dead internet theory.
Dead internet theory, that's right. It's just all garbage and you can't find anything. Feedback. I don't know. If there's any more questions, we're happy to talk about whatever you guys want. Otherwise, we'll just get out of here because I'm spent. Wasn't there a 90s movie with Angelina Jolie about hacking? Was there?
It was called Hackers.
That's where they have like Hackers?
Hack the planet, hack the planet, hack the planet.
Was Angelina Jolie in Hackers?
Yes, very young in that film. That's where you have the stereotypes of the trench coats.
Oh shit, you're right. She's like the short-haired girl. Yeah, okay.
I'm in.
Forgotten that.
I'm in. Oh, you want me to hack the government? Yeah, I'm in. Of course.
Hack the planet. Yeah, I remember that. Okay. Just like TV. Just like TV. That's right. This draws my mind to those little Raspberry Pi computers. They have a lot of potential applications. Neat little gizmos. Sucks that they're so hard to get a hold of. Are they hard to get a hold of? I have one at home that I use for various
Put your post address here. I will send you 100 Raspberry Pis. I use them as door stoppers. So
yeah. I have a question. Why did you give me an Indian accent, Luddick?
Well, okay. Well, it's a bit elaborate. Haven't you seen any of these videos, like these stereotypical Facebook mommy bait videos, where like you have like the kid in class who's too smart for the teacher, and the teacher's trying to make some point about let's say atheism or something, and like the Indian kid shows up and makes the deontological argument for God or something.
Wow, that was really
this
smart. Kid asked his teacher stunned everyone in the classroom.
Yeah, that type of video is it. well, did you know that there is no such thing as a darkness? There is only the absence of light, and such there is no evil. There is only the absence of God. And have you thought of this? Like, whoa, wow, I'm speechless. It's like that type of. That's what I had in mind.
Count Elmsley says, I met Richard Stallman once in person. He was pretty vile. Well, yes, I mean, Stallman is a bit of a meme in that sense, I guess.
He looks
not
like
to say anything
smells.
about his work. He is a bit of a character. Never meet your heroes, I guess. Did you have any comments?
I said he looks like he smells, but he never did.
Yeah, I'd assume that.
He never did that much, interesting in terms of the software bit. It was always very idealistic. I think Linus Torvalds is like the real kind of brain behind.
Torvalds, if you're
but he's also an asshole, by the way. He probably smells better.
I suppose that Torvalds is more influential. But Stallman, on the ideological side, yes, has a lot of. I mean, he commands a lot of attention, if nothing else. Maybe it's the smell.
He's a lol cow, right? It's great, great entertainment.
Nordanon replies to you, I guess. That's very specific, is it? I mean, I knew what those videos were.
Maybe I'm too old. Because
Nordanon is just a zoomer. Yeah, that's it. He just doesn't. He doesn't remember. He doesn't know what Facebook is. Sorry, Meta. I guess. Well, Meta, I guess, is the company now, and not Facebook. All right. Well, I'm not going to waste anyone else's time. Next week, we are not doing an episode because it's Easter and I'm going to be away, and I don't think we'll get the time to pre-record anything. So we'll see you in 2 weeks, and hopefully, if everything goes to plan, we will be talking about a very interesting book that talks a lot about the emergence of green policy and how that have been kind of warped. Got actually beaten to the punch by AA on a cigar stream. It's not the same book we're going to be talking about, but the subject matter is going to be quite similar, actually. All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Luddic Path, for joining me, as always. Do you have anything new you want to shill?
No, just the usual stuff. If people, well, Twitter kind of sucks now. I mean, we could have had a talk about Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter sucks.
I know that there's a lot of people who talk about like the impact of Elon Musk's Twitter, where there is some positives there in terms of what's in the trending section. I think that's the most interesting part of Twitter right now. Everything, like every day I look to the right and I see what's in the trending section. I just this has to have an impact, I think, on a larger scale when we're talking about the managerial decisions.
The negative is that I never see the tweets of anyone I follow.
Yeah,
that kind of sucks.
The interaction bit and the sharing bit it's total trash. So I'm not even going to ask people to subscribe to follow me on Twitter anymore. I'm on there. At least
I have to every day. I have to go onto your profile to see what you have tweeted, because
exactly.
Going to the following tab just doesn't show me your tweets anymore. So
it's forget about that. You should go check praxarchy.com instead. It's much better.
Praxarchy.com. So, Web 2.0. Let's go.
Exactly. Perfect Web 2.0.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you in about 2 weeks. Bye-bye.